Hey guys, so after the Flame Dash build I was pretty burned out and kind of needed a break, but I was always planning to make a second video about that build because it can easily be made into Fireball build, which is also very nice for League start because Ignites are pretty good for clear speed. They're not the best for single target, but at the start of the League you don't really need that, and since you don't really need any specific items, it's kind of good for new players and well, good for League start. I may even use Ignite build for next League start, but most likely gonna be playing with banners. We are getting lightning banner and some kind of fire meteor banner, which I don't know how it's gonna work, but maybe I can use that. So I may even try to adapt this build for banners. So the general idea for this build was to not have any expensive jewels. I do have some expensive items which are not needed, but to compensate that I do have elemental equilibrium, which means you don't need any jewels with flat fire damage to spells, and all the items are basically the same as on that Flame Dash build, which by the way, if you haven't seen, I would highly recommend it because it's pretty funny, especially at the end. I watched it a couple times myself and it still made me laugh. So I was using Searing Touch 6 link, which you don't need to have 6 link, even 5 link would work, and also Kaom's Heart. Those two are the most expensive I think, but even without Kaom's Heart you would still have a decent amount of life pool. Or you could go with a Scepter and a Shield for more life and wouldn't need a Searing Touch and have some kind of other bad armor. So it is kind of flexible how you want to build it, just make sure you don't have any flat fire damage to spells. Also again, I do have Fenumus Weave and Aspect of the Spider, but that actually doesn't work all the time because if I shoot fireballs almost basically off screen, the Aspect of the Spider doesn't reach those enemies, so I don't really benefit from that. So the gloves is definitely up to you. Also this is Elementalist Ascendancy and I'm using Yoke of Suffering. You could do it as a trickster of course, and probably you wouldn't want Yoke of Suffering then, because Elementalist can guarantee shocks and chills despite the damage done with those elements. And Yoke of Suffering can be a bit expensive at the start of the league, but it can be easily replaced with a fire damage amulet. Just keep in mind that spell damage does not affect ignite damage, and fire penetration also does not benefit ignite damage. You may want to go with Namahu's sticky amulet if it's not too expensive at the start of the league, or some rare amulet with fire damage and other attributes like life resistances. As for rings and bell, just cover life and resistances, and if possible get some elemental damage or fire damage. I am using one careful planning because I do lack dexterity, and other jewels just whatever you can get, life resistances, fire damage, generic damage, damage over time. Oh, as for the helmet, I do have a crafted helmet with nearby enemies have minus 9% to fire resistance, which does affect ignite because it lowers enemy resistance instead of penetrating. Also on one of the jewels I had to get some cold damage to spells to be able to chill, and which benefits Yoke of Suffering, which gives 5% more damage. But then again, if you're not using Yoke of Suffering you don't need cold damage to spells. Now for skills and links. Main setup inside Searing Touch Staff, Fireball linked with greater multiple projectiles, burning damage, deadly ailments, combustion, unbound ailments, and for single target you may want to swap greater multiple projectiles for swift affliction. But you don't always need that. Damage for the most time is enough, unless you don't have all the good gears. You could get slightly bit more damage with Immolate, however with Immolate you would have to hit twice, which isn't that great for clear speed. Now once you hit enemies directly with Fireball, it will trigger Elemental Equilibrium, which increases fire resistance for those enemies. So for that I use Orb of Storms with increased critical strike chance, curse on hit, and flammability. It resets Elemental Equilibrium and enemies have less fire resistance then, because Orb of Storm is lightning skill, and also you have some cold damage to spells. So when you hit enemies with Orb of Storms, it increases enemies cold and lightning resistance but lowers fire resistance. And then your main setup ignites from fireballs, does more damage. And I mainly use Orb of Storms against single target like bosses or tougher rare enemies. And also it does trigger Elemental Overload, which gives 40% more elemental damage. Next I have 3 golems. Chaos Golem, Flame Golem, and Stone Golem. As Elementalist I do get extra damage from golems and extra benefits from their buffs. So from Stone Golem I do get more regen, from Chaos Golem I do get some physical damage mitigation, and from Flame Golem I do get more damage. And all of them are inside my +2 helmet, which gives them more life. But to be honest, we still keep dying. So instead of going for Liege of the Primordial and Elemancer, you may just want to get Pendulum of Destruction and Paragon of Calamity nodes. However, you wouldn't get as much benefits as from golems. And you cannot leech life from the damage over time. So the leech from Paragon of Calamity wouldn't actually be that great. Next I have Clarity, Phase Run, Flame Dash, aspect of the spider from Fenumus weave gloves. But if you don't use Fenumus weaves, you may want to use like Arctic armor maybe for defenses, or maybe even take a second course and run like Blasphemy Enfeeble or Blasphemy Temporal Chains. Herald of Ash does not increase ignite damage, unless you have quality Herald of Ash, which does give 10% increased fire damage globally. The burning damage on a Herald of Ash is only for Herald of Ash overkill damage, and you wouldn't want to run Anger Aura because that gives fire damage to spells, which means your Orb of Storms would also deal fire damage and mess up elemental equilibrium. Or you could easily get Mind over Meta Node and get more effective life that way, and just use Clarity for your auras. If you are not using Kaom's Heart, you would have more sockets, and you could also add Scorching Ray with Spell Totem, faster casting, maybe Efficacy as well. And use this setup only for a single target, because Scorching Ray lowers enemy fire resistance, which benefits your ignite damage. And also Scorching Ray does a bit of damage. On a passive skill tree I also do have minion nodes, but only on this big minion wheel. I'm not sure if these nodes are gonna get nerfed in the upcoming Betrayal League, but they are always very efficient. You do get a lot of damage, generic damage, which also increases ignite damage, and your golems also get a bit of benefits. By the way, this passive skill tree is for level 87. You could drop a couple damage nodes here and there and get a couple other things like extra curse or Mind over Matter. Getting more life could be a problem, but this build has 181% life from the passive skill tree, which should definitely be enough. And that basically covers this build. I'm very hyped for the next league, and I try not to think about the next league because the hype is unbearable, and I am also kinda burned out currently on PoE. So I think I'm gonna take it slow and not make that many videos until the next league. I'm currently doing some skeleton build simply because I missed playing with melee skeletons, and I will most likely experiment with that, different variations, so it's gonna take a while. Also, we are very close to 10,000 subscribers, so I will do some kind of video when we reach 10k subs. I'm not quite sure what. I was thinking maybe talking about the history of this channel, how it came to be. I don't know, maybe you got some suggestions. Anyway, that's gonna be it. Thank you for watching and see you soon.